It's week 1 of our 6-week-long punch-along, and I'll be guiding you step by step of the way to making this lovely mandala here, and we'll be using the special technique of punch needle. And I'm going to show you now how to get started. Before we begin, let's go through all the materials you will need: a punch needle tool, a hoop, some cloth, and of course yarn. Those are the essentials you will need. I'm first going to show you how to thread your punch needle. Now the needle that's already in the tool, that's the one that we're going to use. There are 2 other needles that come with the tool, but these are too fine for the yarn that we'll be using. So grab one of the needle threaders that's also included. They're on the other side here. There we go. I'm now going to show you how to thread your punch needle. So you take your needle threader and you insert it through the tip of the needle. The needle is hollow and you push it all the way up through the middle of the tool and out the opening at the back. And then take your yarn. I just need to find the start of mine. There it is. You can open up the eye of your threader a little. That will make it a bit easier to pass your yarn through it. So pass it through until you have a short tail, and then pull the threader back out the bottom to draw your yarn down through the punch needle tool. And then remove the threader. But we're not finished yet. If you look closely, you can see a small hole at the back of the needle tip, and we're going to insert our threader again from the back to the front of the needle. And once again, thread your yarn through the eye, like so, and pull it through the hole. And there we go. We've finished threading our needle. To adjust how long the loops on your punch work will be, you're going to turn this wheel here. On my one here, it's set to 3. Now, if I loosen the wheel and slide it all the way down to 11, 9, you'll see that my needle here lengthens. And the longer my needle is, the longer your loops will be on your punch work. For now, let's set it to 8. Before we get started on the mandala itself, we're going to practice punching first. And that's easier to do with a slightly longer needle. If the needle is really short, you might accidentally pull your loops out of your work. That's step 1. Now set your punch tool aside for now and grab your cloth and your embroidery hoop. So you loosen the screw here and that will remove the outer hoop. And leave the inner hoop on the table in front of you. Now take your cloth and you lay it over the inner hoop, just like that. Now you want it to be nicely centered in the middle of your cloth. And then place the outer hoop over it. And push it down nicely over the inner hoop. Make sure that it's sitting nice and flush with the inner hoop. And then we need to tighten the outer hoop again. You might be able to do so with your hands, but I find that quite hard. So to get it really nice and tight, I like to use a screwdriver. Before that, I make sure that my cloth is stretched really tight in my hoop, and I do that just like this by pulling the cloth firmly on all sides, all the way around, until it's drum tight. And you'll hear it when it's drum tight. And then take your screwdriver and tighten the screw really well. And this way your cloth is less likely to slip out as you punch. You do want it to stay in place. Before we get started on the mandala itself, it's a really good idea to practice the punch action. Now it's up to you whether you use the middle of your cloth for this, or if you prefer, you could reposition your hoop off center closer to the edge so that any holes from your practice piece don't show on the area of the cloth where you're going to punch your mandala proper. There is a way to close up any holes you make. Once you're comfortable with the punch action and finished practicing, simply take a water spray bottle and spray the holes until the cloth is slightly damp, and then the fibers will close up. But for now, I'm going to reposition my hoop as close to the corner of my cloth to leave the center nice and smooth for the mandala. So now take your punch needle that we've already threaded, and we're just going to try out a few stitches. Now hold your punch needle just as you would a pen, in a normal pen hold, as though you were going to write something. You want the hollow opening of the needle tip facing towards you, so that the yarn can run freely through the back of the needle as you punch. And make sure that the yarn is really able to flow freely. You don't want the yarn coming off your ball to come off a tightly wound ball, because any tension might pull your loops out of your work. So before you punch, I would recommend you unwind some of it and just let it lie loosely on the table next to you. Now push your needle all the way through your cloth, right the way through to the plastic holder. You shouldn't be able to see any of the needle anymore. And now try punching a straight line. So try using longer and shorter stitches, and see which way of holding the tool feels more comfortable for you. So for me, that's holding it like a pen, but you might find that a different hold is easier for you. And just like this, keep punching. So practice working in a straight line. And then work your way back to create a double line. Do try and punch as close as you can to the first line. And then we'll work our way back up the line again. So make sure you rotate your work so that the hollow side of the needle is facing towards you. I've now punched 3 lines right next to each other, and if you turn your work over, you can see on the back that you've got these lovely long loops from the punch needle. Now let's try to make some shorter loops. So let's slide this wheel here, and we're going to shorten the needle. So let's set it approximately to 4. I mean anywhere between 3 and 5. With this shorter needle, we'll get shorter loops on the back. Let's say you want to continue from the same place where you left off. Simply pull the excess yarn out through the back until the tip of your punch needle is touching your cloth again, and then continue punching from that point as before. Let me punch a bit away from my first section. That will help you see the difference a bit better. And I'm just going to punch a line down here again. To turn around, this time I'm going to hold my hoop still in front of me and lift and rotate my punch needle instead. Remember, this is just one way of doing this, and you might find something else works better for you. That's why it's always a good idea to practice. Now this time, the hollow side of the needle is facing the direction I want to punch in, but I still need to make sure the yarn can flow freely behind it. And this time I'm punching up again. I sometimes find doing it this way is a bit quicker than rotating my work each time. The key thing is that your yarn is able to run freely. Let's punch a third line next to the others. Here too I'm rotating my punch needle rather than my hoop, but do whatever you find easiest. Here on the back you can see this section is more compact, and that's because we used a shorter needle which creates shorter loops. You can mix things up when you're punching. You might decide that you want to include this flat satin stitch-like embroidery on the front of your work, and that's fine. I've included it in the mandala design that we'll be punching together. So we'll be punching a mix of loops and this flat stitch. Now just keep practicing, try using shorter and longer stitches to make shorter and longer loops. Try a circle, try punching a motif outwards and inwards, and see what different results they all produce, so you get a really good feeling for punching before you move on to the mandala itself. Once you're feeling confident that you've got the hang of the basic techniques and you're happy with the look of your stitches, you need to finish and cut your yarn. To do so, lift your needle from the work, using your index finger and thumb to hold the yarn in place, and slide your needle up the yarn. Be careful not to tug on the yarn, otherwise this will pull the loops out of your cloth. So get your scissors and simply cut the yarn as close as possible to the cloth. And that's it. You're done. One thing you can do, let's say you've decided to punch from the front side of your work to get this nice flat stitch. Then when you punch through for the first time, pull the yarn tail through to the back of your work. Let's just cut our yarn here again. So make sure you're holding the yarn in place as you lift the needle, and trim it as close to the cloth as possible. We're now ready to move on. You can go ahead and pull your stitches out. You can see here that we've got lots of little holes in our cloth. But if you dampen this area with a water spray bottle and scrape over it with your fingernail, oh, you can see it's already working quite well even though it's dry, and this will push the fibres back into place to cover up the holes. But if you dampen the area, it works really well and the holes will disappear completely. It's now time to transfer the template. We first need to move our hoop back to the middle of our cloth. So loosen the screw and set this all aside for now. And then take the template that came with the kit and grab the iron-on transfer pencil. That's this here. Just let me open it quickly. I'm going to put something flat under my template first. And all I'm going to do is trace over the lines of the mandala with my transfer pencil. To use the pencil, you simply twist the end until the lead sticks out the top a little. And then begin in the middle of the template and trace over the lines of the inner circle. And then trace the next circle. If once you've traced over all the lines of the template and transferred it to your cloth, you suddenly notice you've made a mistake, don't worry, the pencil is washable, so if you wet the cloth, the line will go away. And then you can just redraw it correctly once it's dry. So now move on to the next line. That's this little star. And then continue working outwards to the large star. And then the little diamonds between the points. And don't forget this line running around the whole central motif. Then trace the tiers and the small circles. The last thing you want to trace is this outer line here. It runs along here, and as you can see, the sides of the outer circle didn't fit on the paper. But you do need to trace a full circle on your cloth. Let me go on. I've now finished tracing all the lines. And we're ready to iron on the design. To iron the traced lines onto our cloth, lay your template face down in the middle of your cloth. Make sure it's in the middle of your cloth. Then use a couple of pins to pin the template onto your cloth. This is to keep it in place as you iron. You don't want it to move around as your iron moves over it. My iron is on its hottest setting because I know that means it will be hot but not burning hot. If you have a newer iron, you might want to try a setting that's 1 or 2 settings below the hottest. Just see what results you get. So with a hot iron, directly onto the back of the paper, iron over the whole template. I'm pressing down very slightly. You don't need to press hard at all. And you just keep going all the way over the back. It looks like everything's transferred properly, so let's go ahead and remove the paper. And now we can see our design on our piece of cloth. And you can reuse the template to iron the design a couple more times onto other pieces of cloth if you want to make more than one mandala. As I said before, we're missing sections of the outer circle, so we need to draw them on before we can get started. You could use a normal pencil for this, or simply use the transfer pencil to draw a thin line. I'm just going to use the transfer pencil, and I'm just going to freehand the lines. I'm trying to keep them as nice and round as I can. And the same on the other side. And there you have it. We have our design nicely transferred onto our cloth, and next week we will continue and start punching it. And we're going to start here in the middle with the innermost circle.